Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by
The Bridge School, the accredited international online private school of choice, at bridgek12.org.
Porch Light Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlightrental.com.
And by airs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at airs.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com.
And by International Auto Source. We are the vehicle experts for expats, featuring all major brands of automobiles with flexible solutions and financing. On the web at intlauto.com.
Become a global player in your field.
Cross Culture to Go provides virtual support for your global business and career success.
We can help you thrive in 140 plus countries and markets.
On the web at crossculturetogo.com.
This is Ed Cohen in San Diego, California, and welcome to Global TV Talk Show, business unit of globalbusinessnews.net. Go check it out. Our very special guest today is Elizebeth Varghese in New York, and she is an executive with IBM Corp. And also with us from Mexico City is Stephen Howard, author Stephen Howard. Welcome both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on our show. So Elizebeth is known as, I'm going to read this so I get it right, an HR influencer with a focus on technology and strategy, people and purpose. And you believe in international technology enabling vast potential. So why don't you tell us about how all of this relates to transforming to achieve better business outcomes?
Sure. So, I work at the intersection of people and technology. So the work I do is basically taking leading edge technology like artificial intelligence, blockchain, or robotic process automation, and applying that to work so that people can do their jobs better and organizations can tap into everyone's potential more effectively. So it's really the use of technology very intentionally to achieve goals that a company or a community or an organization might have. And what we find is that when you use technology intentionally, when you really understand what it can do and what cannot do, it can really provide dramatic uplift to not just your target audience, which might be a corporation, but also the ecosystem and the community around it. So that use of intentional technology is critical because especially as you're finding more and more acceleration of technology in the marketplace and adoption. So it's kind of that work I do. And then, in all of that, the goal is to center people and purpose and humanity at the heart of it because, technology is here to stay, but it's never going to take the place of people or never going to replace what we, intend to do with it.
So thank you. Now, the world has changed. Everybody's been impacted by the pandemic. And every company, everything. And your involvement, not because of the pandemic, I'm sure, but your involvement is in this space business. And the new generation of kids who are very, very tech savvy. And you're saying that all business in the future will be in the space business. Why don't you give us a quickie on that? And then let's come back and talk about what's on the ground today, and that is companies welcoming back people and how technology can be applied right now.
Sure. So that's a lot of different things, but I'll try and touch upon them very quickly, right? So, we are actually at a very interesting point in history where commercial space exploration has really started operating at scale. So I think everyone's been watching, SpaceX and the Chinese Mars rover. So the barrier to entry in space exploration has dramatically dropped. So it's not just the public government agencies who are in the business of space exploration. Everybody is, right? Different countries are, commercial companies are, small and large organizations. So what we are finding is that what we call the space economy, which is really the commercial and the public space economy, has exploded in terms of size over the past decade. And I think for the individual who's reading CNN or New York Times, I think we kind of hear about the big players, right? We hear about SpaceX or Virgin Galactic, or we know about NASA. But the actual space economy comprises of many small players as well, which are really creating this huge acceleration in the work that's being done there. And also, the space agencies of countries across the world are becoming much more active with the use of technology becoming more ubiquitous. So to that extent, we are expecting, in fact, the commercial space economy to grow to over a trillion, almost by 1.4 to 1.4 trillion by 2030. Right, so Bank of America actually estimates that. So this is a real industry and a sector that is exploding. And Ed, the point you made around every company will be a space company of sorts is really related to the fact that everything we do, on terrestrial, on ground, right? It has an application as we look at commercial space exploration. So whether it's things like blockchain, which is technology we use a lot in supply chain and other things, going to be hugely impactful as we do more space exploration. If you think about health, right? Astronaut health. I was reading about a woman who is now going to be an astronaut with Virgin Galactic, right? So commercial players are looking at health from the perspective of what's going to happen when you send large numbers of people into space. So health is another example, right? When you think about something as maybe more traditional like mining. Now, mining you would not think is there's a space component to it, but companies and government agencies are starting to look at mining on other planets and the moon. So that aspect of what is really happening in the business of space exploration is very real, and we're finding that every industry or sector will have some component that will need to operate there. Another example is GM is actually building some of the technology that's going to be put on the moon. So so just to illustrate that point, right, it is really becoming ubiquitous. Almost like in the old days, we would say every company will become an internet company. You have to, right? So I think they're kind of at the same inflection point with space exploration as well.
Fascinating. Stephen, what do you think about this?
Well, I loved her answer because I was afraid the answer is going to be with the next pandemic, we're going to be working from space instead of working from home. So WFS I was afraid. But no, I love the way Elizabeth has tied it all together and looked at how it's very interesting because I began my career in the semiconductor industry, and a lot of what we were doing at Texas Instruments at that time was at the forefront of the Apollo missions and the Mercury missions and what have you. And so we learned a lot technology-wise from the space exploration period, and it now sounds like we're going to learn a lot from the space commercialization period. So I love it.
So what's going to happen in IBM a month from now when people trickle back to work in the office?
Yes, great question. So I think it's going to be, everyone's going to be happy. Everyone's going to be happy to be back and meeting people, right? I think as vaccinations have increased, I'm definitely observing that when people do get together, nobody wants to leave. Everyone wants to hang around and share that energy. So I think there is that part of it. I think IBM and all corporates are really looking at how can we carefully and productively bring people back into the offices who need to be in the offices, because that's a very important paradigm that has completely collapsed during the pandemic, right? And I'll explain why. We had clients who are bankers, for example, like in financial services, and I think for all of us who understand that industry, You can't trade in the house. You have to be on the trading floor. Security rules are so strict. There's no concept of working from home, right? So you would have traders who would have to get up at 5 a.m., take that train from Connecticut, get into Wall Street, and be at their desks at 7 a.m. before the markets open. And everyone said that you cannot trade outside the office. Come March 15th, when the pandemic hit, monitors were shipped home, and there was some choppiness, obviously, in the transition. But the work that we always thought had to be done somewhere was easily and quickly done somewhere else. And that's just one example, right? So I think what organizations are kind of going to be working through is to really determine what needs to be done in the office, because there are cost implications, there are work-life balance implications, right? Employees some of them have liked this work-life balance, right? So I think the big decisions that corporations have to make are related to, how do we bring people back in safely and productively, but also, who really needs to be back in the office and for what purpose? And then how do we ensure that the utilization of commercial space kind of really aligns with that need, right? So let me just pause there, because I'm definitely seeing a shift towards kind of a pull into the office as opposed to kind of tell people to go in. Offices are becoming gathering places of collaboration, and I think you're going to see that more.
So, Stephen, isn't it so that leaders, to quote Dr. Ward from the recent show, need to unlearn some things and learn how, to learn how to help others innovate?
Most definitely. And I think that particularly one thing leaders need to unlearn is too often leaders have that manager hat on. They're giving directions, they're giving directives, and they have to unlearn that and unlearn that they're not the boss, they're the leader. And one of the key aspects of a leader, you might even say the E in leadership should stand for empathy. I think leaders are going to have to be more empathetic towards the workforce, towards everyone else. But I want to ask Elizebeth here is, what do you think leaders, and I'm afraid of leaders who are 50 plus right now, or even maybe 45 plus, what do you think leaders need to learn about the new technology? I mean, the young people will pick it up, I think, but leaders who are 45, 50 plus, how are they going to handle this intersection of technology that you're talking about?
So, a couple of things there, right? I mean, I have to confess, I think some of the things we observed at IBM with, generational distinctions in adoption of technology kind of killed some of the hypotheses we had. Now, I'll kind of begin with that up front, right? We had found that, folks who are more tenured, we expected folks who are more tenured to be less likely to learn or want to learn. We did find, however, that, when we made learning easy and personalized and kind of tailored towards adult learner mindsets or requirements, the more tenured employees or more experienced older folks like us were more likely actually than younger folk to actually want to learn. So we actually found the consumption of learning to be higher than what we expected. So they were actually the most active learners, right? But the key was to make sure learning was tailored to adult learning styles. So I just wanted to kind of mention that, right?
Right, no, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought, right? But we found that if we made it easy, we made it like, consumable, not, long bites of conversation, it actually did make a big difference. So I think in that context, when you think about, how leaders need to operate and behave, I think it's essentially, Stephen, I'm sure, you will agree with this, right? The whole idea of really being open is almost the first principle, right? Because I think lots of more senior folk might have a certain way of doing things. And I think if they embrace that growth mindset, saying that,
Yes.
hey, things are changing, let's just figure it out. We find that actually becomes a big enabler of adoption of technology or new skills or, ways of working. So that's kind of, I think, what we've observed over time and in looking at learning styles, et cetera.
No,
So
that's
let me
great.
just, let me just say something, then I'll back out again. Global talent, in other words, hire from anywhere, work from anywhere. this is like the new thing, right? Never mind space, but but working from India or the island of St. Thomas or the island of Grenada or Mexico City, and you work from those places and work somewhere else. Like I'm here in downtown San Diego, and now I'm working in Mexico City. I'm working in New York City.
That's right. That's right.
And wow.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the whole aspect of the location of where work has to get done, I think there's two parts of it. I think there's one is the actual reality of, what is feasible, what is doable. And the second is how we feel about where work gets done. And I think the two things have to be treated very separately, because I think, Ed, as you're pointing out, we are working in different cities, right? And we're working in multiple cities, as you pointed out. You're working in Mexico City and New York City while being in San Diego. So the feasibility, the technological feasibility, the collaborative feasibility, I think we can check the box on that. I think the issue that organizations have to really grapple with is how do they actually, what are the perceptions around the location of work? Do managers really want face time because it makes them feel better and feel more in control? Or is it really required for people to do their work, right? I think the three of us would agree that it doesn't really matter where we're sitting. We're as productive. We're, engaging probably more effectively than if, we'd all schlepped and taken a plane and woke up at 5 a.m. and, got to some place, right? We would have got less done. So I think there is that part of it. And I think, so to that extent, thinking about where work needs to be done, how we actually, perceive the value of that work is a very, very important factor, Ed, especially because, as we use technology more intentionally and connect global communities, there is this huge potential to uplift and connect, marginalized communities, right? People in sub-Saharan Africa or India, they might be as effective as coding as, a kid sitting in New York City, right? And so we as a human race, as a global community, leave so much potential behind when we don't integrate and include all of these people. And I think technology can kind of do that for us, but we have to want to do it, right? We have to seek to do it. And I think that's where the intentionality of technology comes in. I know, Stephen, what do you think? I know you've thought and worked a lot about, on these topics as well.
I do, and I lived overseas for a while. What I'm hearing from you, what's striking me, Elizabeth, here is this intentional technology. I think, if you go back before the pandemic, say the 10 years before the pandemic, a lot of offshore work resourcing was done for cost reasons. Right. Now I think the mindset change, and I'm going back to what you referred to earlier, thinking about the mindset is let's look for the best expertise, not just the low cost expertise, but let's look for, whether you say it's a coder in Syria or a coder in India or Brazil, whatever, let's find good expertise that we can rely on, use technology, give them the infrastructure so we can communicate. And I think that's going to be a huge benefit for businesses and humanity going forward.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And I totally agree, right? And Stephen, you've seen that, so you kind of know it can work, and we've kind of crossed that Rubicon, right? From outsourcing and offshoring for labor arbitrage to something that's more intentional and useful. I also think that, as the pandemic has shown us, is that, we truly are all interconnected, right? There's no escaping that, like it or not. And virtuality can actually help sometimes, right? Yeah. And mitigate risk if you have teams.
Yeah, it is. I was coaching somebody a few months ago, and he said his eyes really opened up because he didn't really consider that some of his people working in offshore locations did not have the same internet connectivity that he had at home until, he said, one morning he was on a call, his wife was on a call, and his two children were doing different schooling from home. And he said the 4 people on their home internet at one time crashed their internet. And he said now he empathized, he understood what his workers around the world we're going through, and it was a big eye-opener for him.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that because you mentioned also empathy, right? Because it totally, I think, opened everyone's eyes to how people work and everything we have
Exactly.
going on. So true.
We can't make that assumption that, in San Diego and New York City and Mexico City, technology works pretty well, but sometimes the lights go out and no matter where you are.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a timely announcement.
Hi, I'm Sergey Gorbatov.
I'm Angela Lane.
Together we are researchers, writers and practitioners in the field of human resources.
And we've also been multi-country, multi-assignment career expats.
We owe our professional development and growth to a very large extent to the international assignment opportunities that we have had.
But in a world where distributed work may become the norm, we also want to understand what will happen to the nature, duration, and purpose of international assignments.
Together with our colleague, Julian Dalzell from the University of South Carolina, we're undertaking a study on the future of expatriation.
And we'd value your contribution. You can participate in this important study by completing a simple 10-minute questionnaire.
Access the questionnaire by typing in your browser tinyurl.com/expert study. That's tinyurl.com/expert study. You can also find the link here on Ed's website next to this video.
Thank you for joining us in this study. In return for your contribution, we'll provide you with a copy of our research.
And of course, you'll be invited to an exclusive webinar hosted by Ed, where we will share our findings right here on Global Business News.
And so please go to tinyurl.com/expat study. Take the survey so that we can better understand the future of expatriation.
Something that's really neat is that the Bridge School partners with various organizations to provide learning for their students. For example, we partner with a major ballet company, and we are able to enroll several of their students into our school. So now not only is the student able to participate in a school and have a seamless transition while they're very active in their ballet career, but now they have other dancers that are with them that are doing some of the same courses. So it's almost becoming a camaraderie where they're taking similar courses, they're working together on their ballet, and really being able to form this great partnership with these organizations to provide a needed service. A lot of times there are student athletes who will spend hours and hours at the gym or at the basketball courts, wherever it is. And if they're attending a traditional school, they're in school from 8 to 3. They get a quick snack, and then they're at the gym for 3 to 4 hours in the evening. Coming to us and having that partnership, they're able to break that up throughout the day. They can have a morning practice, get some schooling in, have an afternoon practice, finish their schooling in the evening. So there's that flexibility. And additionally, if there are tournaments or performances, it's fantastic because if there's a week where they have shows straight through, they can take that week off of learning and then pick back up when they're done. So it offers this great flexibility. And for the program owners of these sports leagues, it is a win-win situation for them because they see this need. They see this need that their students need to make sure that they are obtaining the grades necessary to be successful adults in our country and in other countries. But it provides them an environment where they can be successful at both.
Let's talk about the space business and space gen, and about the space business and the not only the technology but the humanity that's involved. So this is not top secret stuff, is it?
No, none of what I, talking about is classified or anything of that sort. In fact, these are all, like I said, the Bank of America statistic, right? The commercial space sector. I mean, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, they've put out very clear analyses of the industry and the sector. And I think it's the reason why I think lots of people don't know about it. It's almost like this, it's a very active, very interconnected global community, but not one that I think is maybe as well known as maybe manufacturing or technology. But I think that is slowly changing, as we're seeing in the news.
Let's see if producer Paul can bring up a couple of your slides here. The slideshow is really interesting stuff. And so please take us through that from the beginning. Excuse me.
Sure.
It'll be just a second here.
Yeah, I think so.
And open the aperture, thrive in the final frontier. The aperture is the lens, right? So you open
the lens.
Open your head. Is that
open your head? Exactly. Open your eyes, right? Think outside what we can just see with one focus or one magnification, right? I think and that's how you see when you look at space, or if you're an astronomy buff, you have to, or a camera or photography buff, you have to adjust the aperture. And I think it goes back to the comments we made earlier about what do leaders need in this kind of environment, right? They need to open their eyes. They just need to be more open, have that growth mindset, because technology is really making everything we imagined possible.
So we have about 10 minutes remaining here, and let's go through these slides, and some of them are just fascinating. And we wait for your voiceover here. Of course, this is bio stuff, as you could see. If you look at the bottom, Elizebeth is on the Council of Advisors for the SETI Institute, which works with NASA. So what is Seti Institute?
So the Seti Institute is an institute that really focuses on astrophysics and astrobiology, and focuses on looking at what we might find outside of our planet, right? So the Seti Institute it's a very well-renowned, eminent organization that really looks at studies of space. And they work with all the space agencies around the world on a number of different initiatives and research projects. I'm also on I also work with SIA, which is a nonprofit focusing on South Asian children, diaspora really in New York City, to help with after-school programming and education. And I think both those interests really tied to what I did as growing up in India. So they're just reflections of my interests and things that I do.
Thank you. Now, in the paragraph just above it, in the last phrase, good technology, what does that mean?
Great question. So we have found that with the emergence of artificial intelligence, it's actually really important to think about how AI is used fruitfully and well. And the word good is used very purposefully, because badly constructed AI, or AI that is not supposed to do what that it can actually magnify bias, it can magnify dysfunction. So it's really important that when you build artificial intelligence solutions, you're really looking at it from the lens of what is right here, how are we using it well. And facial recognition is an example which is in the news quite a bit, that some companies have resisted the sale of AI which does facial recognition, because it can be misused or used unproductively. So IBM has a very salient focus upon good technology and building technology that stands on the right side of history, that will actively work towards ensuring that bias does not creep into how we use AI across the world.
Great, thank you. Let's go to the next one, Paul. Okay, Elizebeth, take it from here.
The spinning globe.
Yeah.
Yes. So, what I just wanted to illustrate here really quick was that, our world is in the midst of so much disruption, and, coming off the pandemic, I think we'll all agree. But we are in the world of business seeing, 5 specific things that I'll quickly touch upon, right? businesses are getting disrupted. There are lower barriers of entry. Eh, there was in the past, it was really hard to buy a New York City taxi cab medallion, but now if you're in an Uber driver, you can start driving people around New York City, right? So the barriers of entry in every industry have changed, massively disrupting what's happening. The pace and use of technology is accelerating tremendously, and companies are more rapidly using and adopting technology. Customers are kind of seeing all of this and making all kinds of demands, and they have all kinds of expectations from what companies need to do, right? They're saying, hey, if Netflix knows what I like to watch, and I like to watch documentaries versus black and white movies, Netflix serves up a queue for me that tells me what I should watch. Why can't my company, or why can't the company I'm buying something from actually do the same? So those needs of customers are becoming very dynamic, and they're very vocal. And to support all of that, corporations and communities need different kinds of skills and capabilities, and some of those skills are quite complex. They're multidisciplinary at times, and all of those things, when you kind of put that through the crucible of data, AI, and automation, it really ensures, highlights that organizations need to understand that everything we do is experience centric. Skills have to be used as the building blocks as companies transform, and it's super critical. The biggest and most important thing is going to be keeping people and purpose and intentionality at the heart of everything that is done. So I just wanted to kind of illustrate that, because all of those things are forces that we're all being buffeted with right now.
I think it's fascinating graphic. Steve, what do you think?
I absolutely, totally agree. And the way she ties it together is lovely. I love the fact that when you're talking about the skill complexity, we talked about empathy earlier. But particularly in the workplace, you're going to have to combine empathy with a bit of psychology, with care and kindness, and so, as you say, it's going to be very complex being a leader in the future. You can't just tell people in the future, "I'll go see HR." If you're not feeling good today, or if you got a problem at home, go see HR, see if they have some resources for you. No, as a leader, you're going to have to be there to support you, and that's the point I keep going back. I'll say, I want to congratulate you, because as I'm thinking about things the last month, and thinking about what I now call, or not me, I've picked it up from others, but work-life harmony. I think you have work-life harmony because you've taken the things you love at work and you do that in your volunteer work on the board and in the children in New York City. So congratulations to you.
Oh, thank you, Steve. It's you know how I appreciate that. It's a journey, but I think if you try and focus on your interests, everything becomes easier, right? So try to.
Very so.
And I love the way you were mentioning, the whole aspect of empathy, and there is. I truly believe there is a right and wrong, right? We all know that, and I think technology can enable both. And I think leaders need to be very cognizant of that. So as I think a lot of the paradigms that you were describing, I think totally in agreement with you. What leaders need to do and what we need to look for in leaders is going to be tremendously important, more than ever before, right? And I think we all know that history has shown that time and time again. The leaders we choose have to, choose well and choose right as well. And I think, that has different implications for how organizations select and groom leaders as well.
One quick one before we move on to the next slide. How have you in IBM, and IBM might be easier, but in other areas, how do you take the fear of technology or diminish the fear of technology in leaders? Because again, so many people just, I come with a marketing background. I don't want to touch technology. It's scary stuff. How can you do that?
That's a good question. I think I have to be honest, and this is what I tell corporations I work with, right? There are going to be people who are just going to resist technology or change for whatever reason, right?
True.
And sometimes it might be bandwidth, sometimes it might be fear, sometimes it might be just resistance to changing status quo. I think it's important to recognize that all of those populations will exist, and you really need a very coherent description or a communication strategy around what technology can do for you, but then also be very aware that a lot of it will fall, or some of it will fall on stony ground. And you need to be able to recognize that, there are some people who are just not going to come along for that transformation journey, and, help them find a place that they might be more suited for. I think we've seen that time and time again. So, but that's important. And, everyone's not going to come along.
Great, thanks.
So I thank you. This is really great. So we've been talking about building skills, new skills, as building blocks to get to a better outcome. And Elizebeth, what you're all about, from what I've learned here in the last half hour or so, is about transforming to achieve those better outcomes. And the items on the left are the blocks, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, that's really interesting. And thank you for helping us learn. Let's go to the next slide. What do we have here?
Oh, this was, I just put this together just to explain, one of the things we talked about early on with commercial space exploration, right? Why do I think that every company will need to be a space company? Very much like, why does every company need to be an internet company? I just wanted to illustrate that, these are all the types of companies that are in the space exploration space, the commercial space, right? There's, lots of companies launching vehicles. I mean, I think we hear about the big ones, but there's lots of companies launching satellites, right? People launching, assisting launch of satellites. There's companies actually doing space debris removal. That's actually a big problem, as we might have all seen, with the debris landing in the Indian Ocean, right? There's obviously, satellite and tourism is beginning pretty actively. So all of these are actual industries within the commercial space sector. So I just wanted to I kind of put this here for us to just, reflect on the fact that, what does that really mean, right? What kind of companies are emerging? All of these are.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, next slide. So what are we looking at? This is a transformation?
Well, I mean, this was again related to, our conversation on space, right? I was just explaining that, I wanted to explain that everything we are doing here, we see as emerging on, on the earth with corporations, especially around, things like blockchain or cybersecurity, the Internet of Devices, or, AI, machine learning, health. All of them are going to be applicable and required as we, see this commercial space sector grow even more. So the opportunities that, are going to emerge from working in this sector are significant. And also the work that companies need to be kind of more broadly focused, right? We've kind of crossed the Rubicon from being in your, geography as a, if you're a American company or Mexican company, kind of moving beyond that to be global. But I think companies have to kind of take that next leap forward to also think that this is not just about one planet. There's a lot more work that is going to be happening with commercial space exploration, and the market is going to be broader as more and more companies join the sector.
Thank you. And on the bottom there, AI and ML. And what is ML?
Machine learning.
Oh, of course. Okay. And so that means what? Looking at a computer and learning from that?
Well, so machine learning basically is a series of transactions that or algorithmic computations that over time can accelerate the efficiency of that transaction or change the things that we might want to do. So as the system basically continuously performs those transactions over and over again, it learns how to make those more efficient and more effective. So we see that in combination with artificial intelligence providing significant lift already on the earth. So for example, we use robots in things like payroll processing, right? Or robots in processing offer letters in recruitment, something as basic as that. And the robots that do robotic process automation and some amount of machine learning are not the robots we think about like from the movies, right? They're basically software applications that perform transactions over and over again. So all of those, when you combine that with AI, huge potential for making things much more efficient and streamlined.
So let me just summarize, because we're running against a deadline here. Next show's coming up. More virtual, more technology, but more humanity.
I think that's a great summary, Ed. Yes, we are going to be more virtual. We'll all be using more technology, but all of that is not going to change what is really the most important, which is people and purpose, and really who we are as human beings.
Stephen, what do you say about well-being?
I love it. And I think that we haven't really talked much about well-being, but I think we're going to be using technology to identify and increase workplace wellness much more. But I love the fact, I think you're absolutely right. We're going to be a more virtual world with more technology, always. But we can get more humanity. And I think that is encouraging for what I said earlier about work-life harmony, and that's going to be a better future. I don't think we need to go back to the old reality. I don't think it's a new reality. I'd like to think that it's going to be a better reality. And so thank you, Elizabeth.
So Elizabeth, how does this all relate to this concept ESG? The sustainability. I forget what ESG means, but it's been used a lot.
Yes, actually, interesting that you brought that up, right? Because it actually ties into both the topic areas we touched upon. Excuse me, let me just silence my phone here. I think there's two things really, right? So we're finding that sustainability is becoming really important to employees, and I'll explain that in a second. And then we're finding that sustainability is actually really important, or should be really important to all of us, especially as we think about space exploration and all of that, right? So when I just talk quickly about employees, we are actually finding that employees, and IBM recently did a study that employees are willing to take jobs that emphasize sustainability, that emphasize greater purpose, and do that at the choose those jobs in those organizations over the ones that actually don't emphasize sustainability. So that aspect of Steve and I, we both talked about humanity and empathy. People actually value that in their employers. So that's really important for organizations and companies to talk about that. And then I think the second part of it is, the truth is it's important to all of us because, we all live on this planet. There's only one planet we have. And I think organizations and consumers are really realizing the interconnectedness of everything we're doing, and how sustainability and being more careful about how we use resources is really critical. So I think both those things tie in, and it's kind of at this inflection point where everything is becoming, the impact of all of that is becoming magnified.
Stephen?
I agree, and I think consumers the same way, and even leaders. It's interesting. We saw Elon at Tulsa recently dropped Bitcoin because he realized the economic impact of mining Bitcoins and the energy it took to, he's going to accept Bitcoins as payment, and now realize that might not be such a sustainable, environmentally friendly way of payments because of the cost of creating Bitcoin. So I totally agree with Elizabeth again.
So I thank you both for being on Global TV Talk Show. It's, to me, a dream come true to have such high quality people and a great topic discussion. Thanks for being on our show. Please come back, Elizabeth.
Oh, thank you so much. This was so much fun. I really appreciated meeting you, Stephen, and you, Ed. And I love this discussion. I think we're, all aligned in what we're working toward.
Well, that's our goal, is to create engaging discussions or conversations. So good.
I've learned a lot. So thank you. Have a great June, and let's talk in July.
Yes, that sounds good.
Excellent.
All right, ciao. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day, and stay safe.